Welcome to our latest episode of Hex Talks. I'm your host, Laurie Brewster, and in our latest episode, I am honoured to introduce you to the co-founder of iconic cult film studio Troma Entertainment, Lloyd Kaufman. Lloyd is one of the most important, hard-working and beloved figures working in independent film today, best known for the legendary Toxic Avenger series of films. Mr. Kaufman has produced, directed, written and starred in countless films over his prolific and oftentimes outrageous career. His bold, irreverent and utterly original productions have inspired a generation of filmmakers, including Quentin Tarantino, Kevin Smith, Peter Jackson and Trey Parker. Staunchly independent, Kaufman has maintained a creative integrity that is unparalleled, never bowing to the pressures of an industry that has become increasingly corporate. He has certainly been a huge inspiration to me and to the way we work here at Hex Studios, so it is my great privilege to introduce you all to the legendary Lloyd Kaufman. I am honoured and delighted to be joined by a true hero and pioneer of independent film, Mr. Lloyd Kaufman of Troma Entertainment. Thank you so much for joining me today, sir. It's a real honour and a privilege.
Well, Laurie, thank you. Thank you very much, and the good people of Scotland for supporting Troma all these years. And we started in 1974. That's when I met you, and you know, we hit it off pretty well. And I'm now going into my 50th year. Troma's 40. I was joking, obviously, but thank you very much. And we do really appreciate our fans in Scotland and at the Fringe Festival, to which I've been invited a couple of times.
I am officially inviting you to the Fringe, and next time you're in Scotland, I will invite you to Hex Studios as well. We have a beautiful old church where we make films, and we have parties there, and you would be our guest of honor.
Terrific. Well, let's make that happen.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's too exciting for me. Thank you, sir.
My wife is a former New York State Film Commissioner for 20 years. She was appointed by both Republicans and Democratic governors. And she's actually much more interesting for the students than I am, probably, because most of the young people are all interested in how do we get financing? She worked with a lot of people like De Niro and all that, Woody Allen, and only recently has she worked with me on hashtag Shakespeare's Shitstorm. She retired from being a commissioner, and now she has made a movie with the word shit in the title.
Which is, of course, your bad influence, sir.
She went from Oliver Stone to Shitstorm. Oscar-winning director to producing hashtag Shakespeare's Shitstorm.
I mean, the first time I met you, I had a chance to meet your wife as well, a lovely lady, and it was actually, it was very evident just how much love and respect you have for one another, and it was lovely to see such a, well, I guess you could say a power couple working together like that.
I will tell her. She's out in the freezing cold jogging. So when she comes in, I'll have her come say hello, assuming she comes in.
Please do. So if we begin with your journey, you were born in New York City in 1945, I think that's right?
Yes.
And you attended Yale University, which is one of the most prestigious universities in the United States. It's no mean feat to get entrance into that institution.
Well, it wasn't as rigorous in those days. I'd never get into it.
Well, your academic studies didn't begin with film or cinema, but Chinese culture and history. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So how did your interests evolve from that sphere, which is a fascinating, sphere in itself, into one that encompasses the creative industries, the creative arts?
Well, I have been lucky enough to be born in America and be born to a ultra bourgeois family. So they gave me a very, very good education. And they also brainwashed me that education should be education. You shouldn't be educated to make money. You shouldn't be educated to try to have a overnight lottery winning. They told me to learn about history, learn about how to write English, how to speak French, that kind of stuff. The value system was that travel and education should be broadening. And so I devoted my high school, as we call it, which was a very strict all boys school, Trinity School in New York, and my Yale, the Trinity School, 12 years of high school or whatever you call it. It was all about, mainly about United States and Europe, and of course the United Kingdom. Very little about Asia or Africa, practically nothing. So when I got to Yale, I thought I would devote my college and those 4 or 5 years to, we call it college, I mean university, the 4 or 5 years to trying to learn a bit about China and Africa. And I dropped out for a year, and I spent 1 year in the bush in Chad, Central Africa, where I lived for a year without electricity or running water or any kind of, there was no phones, no nothing where I was. There were a lot of monkeys and snakes and lizards and lots of diseases that I managed to get. But I did see a lot of very nice naked people running around, usually women. And that probably had a great effect on my oeuvre, as we say. And then the China thing, I just, they've been there for 8,000 years, and I love the art. So I thought, well, let's see what they're all about. And when I took the major at Yale, there were only 4 of us out of 1,000 who were studying China and the language and the culture and all that stuff. Nobody ever thought we would recognize, nobody thought Nixon would go to China. That was not in the cards. I just did it because of wanting to have a broad, bourgeois education. And of course, that naturally led to movies with people having explosive diarrhea and vomiting and fucking each other, whatever else.
But this intellectual curiosity on your part about the much wider world is an important aspect of informing
I agree.
art.
It's much more important. The French newspaper compared me to Marcel Duchamp. I would bet that 90% of the American film industry don't even know who Marcel Duchamp was. At least I have
we'll have a note on the video for folks.
Yeah,
you're right.
It's all about money, 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 money. If you want to make money, as I said, I had the greatest opportunity as a bourgeois graduate of supposedly one of the greatest universities in the world. I could have become a hedge fund person, but how disgusting is that? All you do is money, 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 money.
That's quite right. I mean, even for myself, I was a student at St Andrews University, which is a bit like a kind of Eton, Cambridge for Scotland. And
nice.
I was doing ancient history and theology there. But I came from a working class background. I was very lucky to get in, narrowly. But there was a point in my life, and there will have been a point in your life when learning all this, experiencing life in a much more intellectual and wider way, switched to also bringing something creative and artistic. What was that motivation? What switched it for you?
To go to film?
And art, really, as an artist, yeah.
Well, it's the fault of Yale University. When I was a freshman, which is the first year, they put me in a room with a movie nut, and our beds it was a very small bedroom, and our beds were head to toe, and at night I would inhale his Godard stinking feet, and slowly the aroma du Troma was born. He ran the Yale Film Society with another person with whom I became good friends. And they turned me on to, I would go to the screenings of the movies. And by chance, these guys were very much into the auteur theory of filmmaking. They believed in the theory that Godard and Chabrol and the Cahiers du Cinema gang, who were journalists. Eric Romer, there are about 6 of them who would write the Cahiers du Cinema, the magazine of the French Cinematheque, and the Yale Film Society. When I go there, they only showed primarily auteur films because that was their big deal, and they had a big stack of Cahiers du Cinema magazines, the magazine of the Cinémathèque Française. And since I speak French, being bourgeois, as I told you, they were just sitting there. So I would take them to my room and skim them, and I kind of brainwashed myself that I want to be, a Samuel Fuller or a Jerry Lewis or a Charlie Chaplin or a John Ford or a Claude Chabrol. I didn't want to particularly go to Hollywood and have to work my way up the food chain and kowtow and kiss ass and all that kind of stuff. And I foolishly opted to go in the direction of having total control over my movies. The auteur theory, by the way, I should have said something in case your listeners are not familiar with it. The whole idea is that the director is the author of the movie. The director is the mind, the brain, the heart of the film, and that the oeuvre of the director should have a certain identifiable style, and and to some extent, my movies are certainly recognizable as Lloyd Kaufman Troma movies.
Absolutely,
just very underground. Not everybody can be an auteur movie maker and end up as Michael Bay.
No, I think so, and whether one prescribes to auteur theory or not, those films that are generally considered auteur do serve, I think, as a huge inspiration for first-time filmmakers. When they see such a distinct artistic vision, it makes them think, wow, I could have my own distinct artistic vision.
Art should be first, then entertainment, if you're in the movie business. And that's it. I don't see why we all have to make money. Why is that? Why do we have to have Rolls Royces? What is this glamour, this bullshit at the Cannes Film Festival? It's more important now to go to parties in the Cannes Film Festival. It's more important to walk the red carpet. And half of the people who do that, they don't even go watch the movie. They just want to be photographed or have themselves photographed or whatever. I mean, it's insane. So the great artists of the world didn't necessarily make any money. Although when they die, people like Van Gogh, finally his paintings became as precious as Picasso. It just took a while.
This is right. And it's interesting because when one considers art, cinema, they have often these lofty ideals of what art and cinema is. But as we know, artists have lived their lives in the gutter, as well as, it takes their greatest patrons to place them on ivory towers, but true art can emerge from anywhere. And in independent
I'm reading
film,
this book right now.
Phantom Empire.
It's terrific. You can't read this book unless you've seen a shitload of movies. He writes beautifully, and he's basically summing up the 20th century of movies. How cool is that? But some bozo who decides I'm using the right pronoun now, Bozo X, who's they just start making films. They think it's that Troma takes drugs and we just have a good time. It's always a big party, and even people who've worked for us have misunderstood how I operate. So you have to read some books. You have to have a point of view. You have to have a style. You have to have some context with your life. It's not all Star Wars.
I agree completely. I think one of the biggest dangers we have for in the present day for folks that aspire to become filmmakers or work in film is their desire to emulate pop culture on a very superficial level, or even just to perform or to create in a very presentational style, like with the amount of YouTube content where everyone is just, paper thin.
Sure.
You
And the
do have to.
mainstream doesn't, mainstream is too busy, and also they can't make money promoting independent films. They've got to go with the major studio films, and no matter, it's always the big movies who get, or the movies that their vassals make, which are politically correct and okay for Netflix and Amazon, or with no real, nothing to say, no point of view, they have style, I guess, but and they're entertaining, but they're not going to be around in 50 years, guarantee you.
No,
they won't be around
exactly.
in 5 years. How many movie stars who started their movies in 1983 are still known by people? The Toxic Avenger is known, but there aren't too many ingenues who came along in 1983 who anybody remembers. You have a couple.
No, you're quite right. With that film and others, you created cinematic works that have proven that they have survived the test of time. And I think that's the greatest achievement for any artistic work. We talked a little bit about the studios and the corporations. An early part of your career did see you work with the studios in a junior capacity when you were, finding your way and working. Can I ask what that experience was like, and what it was about the studios that turned you off from wanting to develop your career further within that system?
Well, again, one of the big takeaways for me, Laurie, from Chinese studies was the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. And he looks at a dual universe. You don't have good without evil. You don't have pain without pleasure. They're together, the yin and yang, basically. And the thing about the studios is, I would say 75% of the movie, maybe more, at least 75% of the movies that inspired me and the directors that inspired me came out of Hollywood. I saw them via Hollywood, 1940, 50, 60s, 20, from Lumiere through the 60s. Those were my inspirations. So indeed, ironically, it's the studio movies that at whose knee I worship. But the media has changed a lot, and it's become very, very consolidated. The festivals like Cannes have become totally controlled by huge corporations and fascist way of thinking. I made a little documentary about Cannes called From Festival to Fascism. You can see it on Troma now, our streaming service. So yes, indeed, Samuel Fuller, and who's not a major director, but I searched him out. I became friends with him. Wonderful auteur director. His movies are absolutely classics and terrific. And I'm afraid that today people don't even know who he was. People of that, Chaplin, Keaton, John Ford, Howard Hawks, Stan Brakhage, Fritz Lang, Renoir.
They represent an era and approach that is required watching for any aspiring filmmaker today. You also had some experience with Canon as well. What was that like?
Well, here's sort of what happened. I was graduating from Yale University. My last year, I had 2 job offers. One, well, first of all, I didn't want to go to film school. I'm sorry, I started to go in that direction and switch. I have that difficulty of kind of staying on the subject. So I decided no film school for me. I had enough stress from my educational experience. So I figured I'd go out and make a couple of movies while I was at Yale. I made 2 feature-length movies, both of which are unwatchable. And then from there, I tried to find some jobs where I could learn something. So I had one job offer to work in in Hollywood, as a toilet cleaner or whatever on a Barbra Streisand movie, and I had another offer to clean toilets at Canon Films. And I went home my home was only about an hour and a half from Yale, and I took acid. And whilst I was on LSD, I made the decision that I would stay in New York and take the job at Canon Films, which, for those of you who don't know, Canon was an independent movie that had a supernova-like history. It almost acquired MGM. Came very close. They were on the cover of Newsweek magazine. The boys from Tiberius, Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus, and but before they took over Canon, Canon was a much smaller company. Canon was like Troma when they took over. So this is before the boys from Tiberius. So I decided I'd work in New York, stay in New York, try to become an independent movie director, keep control of my movies, but try to learn at least how do you make movies. I did learn a lot by making my own damn movies at Yale. I had a Bolex and a 16 millimeter camera, and I got a fair amount of experience by making these two feature-length movies, which you don't want to see. And so when I got out of Yale, I started a more ambitious movie whilst I was working for Canon. And I met people at Canon who were very helpful to me and helped me make my first sync sound film, which, by the way, discovered Oliver Stone and some of the Warhol people. And you can see it on, it's awful, but you can see it on Troma now. The New York Times gave it a very good review, and it had a pretty good, it was made for $8,000 in 1970, which is fascinating because today $8,000 back in 1970 would probably be $80,000, and today
Right.
people are actually making wonderful movies for $2,000 today. So it's a different world. How cool is that? Anyway, I learned a lot working at Canon. They were making, for the most part, they were making low budget garbage. I don't think anything good came out of their company. They did distribute on which I worked, a Jodorowsky movie, which I think the problem is they would buy the rights to movies and then they'd insert scenes so the movies would be a little more sexy, or they'd get a shitty cowboy movie, western, what really low budget western, and then the supervising editor, Billy Sachs, who edited who eventually went on to direct The Incredible Melting Man. The three of us would go and shoot these insert scenes. Again, I was only the production assistant, but George Norris and Billy Sachs were the ones. We as a team we'd go and shoot these insert scenes, and then George Norris and Billy would edit them into the whatever movie we were chopping up, and they were all garbage. Then a miracle happened. Very important thing to my career, and I'm glad you asked about Canon because it was very important to me. And the two guys who owned Canon were great guys, and I mean they were not that far from Troma. They were kind of like Troma, like Michael Hers and me, except they were more. They were more interested in making money, but they had acquired John Avildsen's one of his, or maybe I think his second or third movie, and it was unfinished. And he was in the editing room at Canon editing that. John G. Avildsen went on to do Rocky, just so you know.
Yes, of course.
He just
The
died.
Karate Kid as well.
Karate Kid, a genius. He was great, a good guy. And if I have a mentor, he is one of two or three. And so I would say, hey, good morning, and all that. And I'd go out and get people coffee or deliver stuff or rewind films or clean the toilets, whatever they wanted. And somehow Avildsen discerned that that I liked film like he did, and that I had a brain. I'm not sure how he found that out, but the next thing I know, I got to go to the set of Joe, which was a movie that Avildsen made, which is again a major lesson. He took a piece of shit script, an absolute exploitation garbage. I hate to use the word exploitation because every movie exploits something, whether it's De Niro or whether it's Tarantino.
You exploit Robert De Niro. You exploit Terry. I mean, they're
Sure.
all exploited. It's ridiculous. But the point is, they were doing garbage, and they had the courage to let John Avildsen uh, uh, come in and direct this property that they had, which was called The Gap, and it was awful. And Avildsen brought in Norman Wexler to rewrite the script, a total rewrite, and out of that came Joe, which actually got nominated for an Academy Award for Best Screenplay, which is pretty damn good for a movie made in New York by unknowns for about 150,000 US dollars. To get that would never happen today. Not in a
No,
million
not at
years.
all.
They wouldn't even the New York Times probably wouldn't even review it. But at any rate, the movie was a huge success. But the first day I went on the set and I saw the shots that Avildsen was setting up, and I sort of heard his patter, his chatter. I could see he really cares about making movies. He loves movies. I attached myself to him, and I forced him to watch Battle of Love's Return, the first movie that I did in sync sound, and the poor guy had to sit. It was 16 millimeter. And it's about 90. No, it's about 80 minutes. I curried his favor, and he brought me along, and I learned a lot on Joe. And then when he was trying to get financing for his next project, I told him I'd work for free, and as a result, when he did get his next job, I catapulted from cleaning toilets to being an assistant director, and I knew nothing about that. And
That's
then
incredible, though.
turned out the production manager was a douche, and so they promoted me to production manager. So I basically lived in the production office. I did the casting and the production managing all and location. I did a lot of this stuff by living there and just working 22 hours a day and that kind of stuff. And we became pretty good friends. And he brought me on to a couple of his other movies, including Saturday Night Fever, uh, for which he also hired Norman Wexler to write the script. And the script of Saturday Night Fever is the script of Norman Wexler. It's not the movie of John G. Avildsen because he managed to get himself removed. How do you say it? Fired, I guess, from that movie. And I did a pretty good campaign to try to get the big boss. Robert Stigwood, a good guy. I tried to get him to reconsider and take back. Who am I? I'm a lousy.
Yeah.
I was location manager or executive in charge of locations, and Stigwood was very polite. He gave me a meeting. He's the guy who basically produced the Bee Gees. He was their manager and producer and discovered him, and a very good guy. And at any rate, he listened quietly and said no thanks. He's got somebody else. They already hired somebody else. So John Badham came on, and Badham also a great director. So how lucky was I? I got to work with two really, really good directors on two movies that have become American iconic movies, right? What better film school could you have than to work with John G. Avildsen and John Badham?
It is absolutely remarkable. And yet, it is also an opportunity that could only have come about based on your dedication towards pursuing every opportunity, even what some would call the lowliest opportunity at first. You didn't consider yourself superior to the opportunities and work your way up.
Hold on. What? No, I'll just turn it around here. This is Laurie. You met him in Glasgow when we went to the Fringe Festival. He said how nice you are and how loving we are with each other. All right, so now you can put on your Da Vinci, your Yves Saint Laurent vest and get the limousine and walk the red carpet. The commissioner is pleased. Anyway, where were we?
One of the problems we have at the moment with young folks, particularly in the United Kingdom, and in areas that are further removed from the centres of film production, is that folks want the instant gratification of celebrity status, and they also consider themselves too good for opportunities, even low paid, never mind voluntary or anything like that. And as you know, independent film is a cruel and hard mistress at the beginning. You have to earn your stripes. But one of the challenges, I guess, that medium faces is just the way that corporate pop cultural entertainment sells the right to success without, one, fighting to earn it, or two, creating your own sense of success, with, for example, your own artwork, is a challenge. So can I ask you a question, sir? In terms of the founding of Troma Entertainment with your partner, Michael Hertz, in 1974, I sometimes wonder if you and Michael sat together and thought, should we make Troma like Canon insofar as a company that finances, produces, and distributes and exhibits its own films in a structure that's often called a vertical integrated studio structure? Was that at all a conversation that happened, or were you always just thinking, how, Troma, what will Troma be completely different to anything, or what was that conversation like?
Well, Michael Herz was at Yale. I met him through my brother, who was a camp counselor with Michael Herz at Camp Tarigo. And Michael met his wife there also. My brother could have become Michael Herz's wife, but it went the other way. He married a woman. Michael Herz married a woman, and my brother married a woman too, oddly enough. So let's see. So then what happened? Michael and I, he didn't want to be a lawyer. He went to law school, became a lawyer, and he's really smart. I mean, no joke. And he has seen every goddamn movie you can imagine, and he's very subdued. He doesn't like any kind of public life, and he doesn't blab like I do. But yet, if I mention something like The Hunt, there's a movie out now called The Hunt. Not bad. And Macon Blair is in it, who's writing the Toxic Avenger $200 million remake. So I thought I'd look at it, and it's quite good. But Michael had seen it. Michael had seen it already. He had seen what is it, Brawl in Cell Block 99. He just doesn't yap about it, and he's seen every, you can mention Henry Hathaway's Street, 94th Street, what was it, Murder on 94th Street or whatever, and Michael's seen it. So, and he's extremely smart. But we both had the same stupid idea to try to make our own damn movies, hold on to the negatives, own the negatives, own the original material, own all the rights, and basically operate by like a little full service movie studio. And of course, starting with absolutely nothing. And of course, there were models for us to look at, like Roger Corman. I saw Roger Corman's movies at the Yale Film Society. He was an auteur filmmaker until he stopped directing. And also there was Canon, but they were just, low end. I never even thought about working for them, or I never saw anything they made that I particularly cared for, except Joe. And there were several small studios in the early 70s. There were probably 30 small studios distributing money-making, low-budget movies, many of which, like the American International Pictures movies or the Hammer movies, that were quite good, that were auteur directors. I'll put Roger Corman against Claude Chabrol. I put them all against any of the Hollywood directors. But they made a certain kind of movie, so they never got the adulation that Tarantino is getting. But I say Tarantino is a major auteur director, and when he was a kid, he was a huge Troma fan, and that's when I met him, when he was a kid. So I'm happy that there are people in the mainstream who are indeed. James Gunn's another one. He loves auteur films, but he wanted to move up to bigger projects, and he's extremely talented and a great guy. Same with Trey Parker and Matt Stone. When we helped them with Cannibal the Musical, nobody understood it except for Michael Herz and me.
I think what's really interesting, and is also something that has inspired our own company, Hex Studios, is the way you've combined auteur artistic sensibilities with the creation of your own films that you've directed and the films that you've also championed, which you've distributed. This is something that is a little bit like us. You know, we take our inspiration a bit from Hammer and Amicus, but direct inspiration also, and you could say some hero worship, is yourself with Troma. Also, Roger Corman, who is a patron of our company, gave us a quote and is very helpful.
Wonderful.
And AIP, you know, and of course Canon as well. Although its story is very different to Troma's and Roger's.
Roger Corman's a class act. The boys, the guys, the two guys who managed to create a house of cards for Canon, they didn't love. I mean, maybe Menachem Golan, I think, did like movies, but I mean, they were after money. It's just, it was, they weren't really, the other one, his partner was a sourpuss. They had no interest. I think Menachem Golan truly loved movies, but that's about it. In fact, I filmed a little piece for his, when he turned 80, they, at Cannes, people asked me to film a tribute to Menachem from Van Damme. And we had some business with Menachem Golan, but you know, there's a whole different thing. Corman is again well educated. He loves film. He's got a good, you know, he's class act. John G. Avildsen also, you know, good guy, an honest guy, straightforward, unpretentious, just terrific. And same with Stan Lee. I was friendly with him for 50 years. And hashtag Shakespeare's Shitstorm, by the way, is dedicated to the memory of John G. Avildsen, Stan Lee, and Terry Jones. Monty Python is another big inspiration for Uncle Lloyd here. And I became very friendly with Terry, and we lost the three of them, plus my wicked stepmother. So hashtag Shakespeare's Shitstorm is dedicated to the memory of the four of them.
So what I was going to ask you is what you might consider to be the highlight of your career so far and your most frustrating moment. I guess these are the two opposites, although often these moments arrive on a week-by-week basis.
Yeah, it's hard to pick one thing, but I think that the culmination of my 50 years is finally, since 1974, I've been hoping and praying that I could get on to the Hex Studio podcast. And finally, in the year 2021, I've achieved that.
That's
As
the
far
low
as-
point, but the high point, no, Lloyd. What was the high point?
No, that's the high point.
That's the low point.
There are so many fucking low points. You know, first of all, I'm kind of manic depressive anyway. But you know, if you're going to be an independent movie maker, they never, and I'm talking about the world, they never run out of ways to humiliate you. From the high school student to whatever who takes you to a screening with 3 people and a sheet on the wall, to people at the mainstream who keep you waiting 2 hours, or create to have you make a luncheon appointment and then don't show up, and you're sitting in a posh restaurant with nothing to do except pay the bill, or try to figure out how to get out there without eating so you don't have to pay the bill. You know, there's just constant. And if you read my books, I've written 7 books. I talk a lot about the constant humiliation, constant getting shit shoved in your face. It never ends. So I can't pick one particular moment. I think one good moment, which I should have looked at as a very good sign, when we had Surf Nazis Must Die, when it was finished and we were distributing it, we bought ads, full-page ads in Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Screen International, full-page ads saying, for your consideration, Academy Award, Best Picture, Surf Nazis Must Die. And they took our money, but they didn't run the ads. Variety decided they would have to be a censor, that the Surf Nazis Must Die ad was an insult to the Academy of Motion Pictures. This is the Academy that has a hashtag, Oscars So White. This is the Academy that was one of the creators of the American Blacklist. This is the Academy that was homophobic. This is the Academy that was anti-black people. And they're telling me what to do? Fuck them.
I think a lot of people working in independent film, well, when they start to work in independent film, don't realize just how low the ceiling is when it comes to the freedom to become, to get your films out there, and how monopolized not just the industry is, but in terms of communications and getting your word out there.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Sure.
and
YouTube.
technology's made that an even greater challenge as well, and one that we have to constantly try and overcome.
Well, the 50 years of my movie making, if you were to do a graph, the power of a small number of giant media conglomerates in our country, they are phone companies, they are ISPs, internet service providers. They are as far removed from art as you could get. And unfortunately, the industry here, and I think around the world, has become very, very consolidated to the point where if you're not partnered up with a vassal of one of the huge mega conglomerates, or with your local government, and the United States, the government does nothing for independent movies. So I'm excluding the United States government because they only help the majors.
You know, a microcosm example of what you're talking about with media conglomeration is an interesting observation I made when, say, I was producing a horror film, a low-budget horror film, maybe about 8 years ago. There were almost hundreds of independent blogs, websites that were created by individuals that were passionate about horror. But as time's gone on, the way that corporations like Facebook and Google have worked, they made traffic to those sites so low that eventually these fans would end up being grouped together in Facebook groups instead of having their own websites.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of there being lots of websites, you would have dedicated horror websites. Like the biggest ones get bought over by corporations. Now you have horror news getting put out by supposedly impartial websites such as Blumhouse.com.
Who are they're vassals of Comcast, who own
Exactly.
Universal. They own NBC network. They own. I mean, it's yeah, absolutely. But I've met Blum a couple of times. He does love movies, and he's manages to negotiate and make some very good movies.
It is a challenge to get your voice out.
It's worse than ever, in my opinion. YouTube took down our channel. We've had a channel there for 10 years with our 800,000 followers, whatever you call it, subscribers, right? We had one day we woke up and the channel was gone. And the explanation was community standards. Well, the movies are the exact same movies we put up 10 years ago, other than newer movies, but they're Troma movies. There's no difference. And for some reason, suddenly community standards entered into it. The other problem with YouTube is movies like, the Toxic Avenger, which, we'd get maybe there'd be, let's say 1 million people would watch it in a year on YouTube. We would get maybe $1,800 for that one movie from YouTube. The next year, the same film did just the same number of people watching it. In fact, it were more people, and we got about $1.08. So that stopped helping the independent. And then YouTube apparently has decided to set itself up as a censor or something. I don't know. At any rate, our fans went crazy, and this is why you got to fight. You can't lie down. Our fans went crazy, and they created a hashtag called Save Troma's Free Channel. and our fans went all over the place with that, including to major media. And 2 days later, our channel magically reappeared. So the next thing we did to get, we took all the movies off of our YouTube channel and we put them all on Troma Now, and along with the newer movies. So the Troma YouTube channel mainly has my editorials and up-to-date music videos and short films, and there's still good stuff there, and it's all free. But Troma Now has all the movies.
Your criticism of YouTube and its treatment of trauma and its films, which were matched by the outrage fans had as well for this censorious kind of behavior, is a good example of the great caveats of, as I see it, video on demand and its control by Google, Amazon, Apple.
Yeah, it's a good It's a good example of humiliation and horrible moments making being an independent filmmaker.
For example, when Amazon originally opened up its own more accessible video on demand features, where filmmakers could sell their films, and on Amazon Prime, they were originally offered at 12 cents an hour. And in fact, sorry, 16 cents an hour. And that tariff has dropped over the course of 4 years to now 0.1 cents an hour.
Sure. Yeah, I don't doubt it.
But by that point, everyone had put their independent films up there, and there was not many, how could you access the marketplace?
Exactly.
It's one of the reasons our company has gone against conventional wisdom at the moment by investing a lot of our time and resources in trying to produce fancy special edition physical box sets. I'm not saying that's the best solution for everyone. It's just physical media is one of the few ways that some distributors are still making money. It's just that revenue is declining as physical media disappears more and more from retail outlets. Ours are available online, but it's not, there's still a ceiling on that though. And so, for example, with Troma Now, it's so important as well for companies like ours to try and figure out how we can produce revenue digitally as well as physically, and not just go into the hands of, as you would call them, the devil worshipping corporations.
Yeah. I'm afraid that's a very good point. And we've spent 47 years trying to be our own studio. And it's basically thanks to our fans. I mean, we look like a much bigger corporation than we are. I think we have a maximum 10 employees, and most of them are in their 20s. And the fans are really what fuels Troma. They, in this country, in fact, you're giving me publicity right now. I don't get interviewed very often. The last time I was interviewed by the New York Times was more than 30 years ago. They were interested then for some reason, but now that it's my 50th year, and apparently all the stuff we've done has no interest to them. The fact that there'd be no Deadpool without Troma, the fact that James Gunn, the Guardians of the Galaxy came from Troma, the fact that Eli Roth, Oliver Stone, Samuel Jackson, there's a Troma Dance Film Festival for 20 years. I mean, what more do they want? But no interest whatsoever. So, it's very discouraging, but you have to keep plugging. You have to be inspired by the books about film and by watching a film, by watching film. I just rewatched Charles Lawton's movie, which many people say is the best film ever made. Hunter, the Night of the Hunter, Night of the, what is it? Charles,
Night of the, I think it is Night of the Hunter.
Yeah, maybe it is. Anyway, Charles Lawton, Robert Mitchum is in it, and it's a wonderful film and very inspiring. Just watching it inspires me. West Side Story. I love musicals, and I watched that yesterday. I forgot there's some pretty interesting, weird experimental opticals in it, and it took quite a bit of risk for a huge movie. Nowadays, I don't think nowadays the directors are permitted as much latitude and freedom. I think the smart directors like James Gunn are able to get, and Trey Parker also, are able to get what they want through nicely talking to people and doing what they want to do, and in, somehow negotiating and getting through it. I can't do it. I've always been a little bit difficult with partners.
I think that segues into a question I have, quite an apt question. So now this is just my opinion. It might not be your opinion, but I think more and more recently over the years, the role of a director, at least in studio films and commercial films, is becoming more and more diminished. So, for example, it seems that the studios can just pull in a celebrity, a singer, an actor, and they make their first ever feature film that just happens to have a $40 million budget, you know, and maybe an assistant director and production manager that have done more tours of duty than a Vietnam War veteran, but still, it's their celebrity debut. And when we consider the directors that might have inspired us, they were very much filmmakers. They learned their craft, they worked the camera, they went out and got shots. They didn't just walk into set like a wedding planner, you know, anointed by the studio heads.
Yeah, you're right. Samuel Fuller, he wanted to make good movies. He was a journalist, so he pulled his stories came ripped from the headlines. Fritz Lang, I have some letters. We corresponded. I forced him to watch one of my black and white feature length films when I was at Yale. Poor guy, he was wearing a patch. But the point is, they that was what they cared about. Ernst Lubitsch, Chaplin, Keaton. Keaton was never driven by money. I mean, you know, they maybe didn't know how to handle money. They were artists, and they developed their craft over years and years and years in vaudeville or whatever it is. And it was about the movies. It was not about conforming. And nowadays, you know, the baseball in my country, the way they do it now is statistics. There's a great movie also. I think it's written by Sorkin, Andrew Sorkin. It's a wonderful movie about how statistics have totally changed how baseball teams and baseball exists in the United States. Players don't stay with the New York Yankees for their entire career. So how do you become a fan of the New York Yankees when they've got different people every 2 minutes? You know, whereas up until maybe 15 years ago, the teams were teams. There was Mickey Mantle here and Duke Snider there and whatever. And the attitude now is, and just like the movies, well, if we put in Olympia Dukakis, Oscar-winning old woman, let's see, she would go. Let's see what's the statistics. How does she do selling tickets at the box office? Oh, okay. Let's switch her to Lindsay Lohan. Lindsay Lohan tracks better. Can you imagine that? My friend Trent Hager, who made an amazing independent film called 68 Kill, and he has some stars in it. It's terrific. Anyway, he worked for Troma, and he starred, and he was my assistant for many years, and worked. He starred in a couple of Troma movies too. A great guy. Anyway, he wrote a script about two old women who and this is based on reality. These two old women would take in bums, homeless people, and they would buy them insurance, life insurance. And then they take them to they feed them, give them a few bucks, take them to an alleyway, and then run them over, kill them, and collect the insurance. They got caught, but a great idea. So Trent Hager wrote a script about the two old women, and blah blah blah. And it was they had the producer, the money, the studio, everything's there. Shirley MacLaine, Olympia Dukakis, both of whom I think are Oscar winners. What more do you want? So the next thing he knows, the studio or the money starts tracking. They call it tracking statistics, like they're doing with baseball. And it turns out that they need to have somebody young. So they change. They change. This is like 2 weeks before you're going to begin shooting. they changed the star to Lindsay Lohan, and and then the film gets put off, and then Lindsay Lohan immediately gets put in jail for something, or gets arrested, or totally, out of it, totally. There was the last time it was the worst thing she'd ever done in terms of getting arrested. So her career was kind of over, and they couldn't put her in the. So that was the end of Trent Hager's movie.
Gosh.
It's statistics, and right after that, the biggest, just around the same time, right a bit after it, the biggest grossing movie in the world, or at least in our country, was a movie called. It was about old men on motorcycles. Huge hit. It was so big that they made a sequel. Good cast of all old men. It was a hit of the year, or one of the big hits of the year. What was it called?
I know the film you mean, but I can't recall.
It's
the
a good
name
one
either.
too.
But we will find out the name, and we'll put text on the screen
good.
so people can check it out.
Yeah, it's funny as fuck, and good talent. Good. I don't know who directed it, but it was great. And Trent Hager's career was fucked by that stupidity of statistics, right?
Yeah, it's horrible, and it's also a good reason as well to persevere with independent film if you never want to be in that situation. Although independent film does offer us our own unique nightmares.
Lloyd, yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to ask
By the
you,
way, I'm thinking. So don't tell anyone. But and luckily nobody's going to listen to this podcast, so I don't have to worry. But I'm thinking of circling. I'm joking. I'm thinking of circling back. And after this COVID thing is all through, I'm going to, have lunch with Trent Hager and see if he's interested in doing it on a much lower budget, because the script was terrific. You could do it without stars, and it would be a very interesting film. You probably could do it for under $500,000 US dollars, or
sure
maybe less. Maybe less.
And it's a crime as well for a great idea and a great script to sit unproduced for year after year gathering dust. What's the point? I was going to ask you about William Shakespeare.
Wait a minute. One more lesson for you students. On the other hand, Rocky, on which I had the privilege to work, and in which I appear, by the way, one of my finest acting roles. I played a drunk, which was typecasting, but what are you going to do? Rocky, brilliant script. And the big boys did want to put in big stars. They wanted John Travolta. They wanted Perry King. They wanted Sly, as we called him in those days, Stallone, and the director wanted, and John G. Avildsen wanted to keep it with Stallone. Stallone was the guy. He wrote the script. He is Rocky, and he's a good guy. And he held out. He fought, and yes, they didn't get the $1 billion budget. They made that movie for about $1 million, and all the Philadelphia footage was non-union. Troma, our crew from John G. Avildsen's Cry Uncle, this wonderful film that I told you about earlier, Paul Sorvino's first film, Cry Uncle, which Troma still distributes. It's on Troma now. Cry Uncle. It's fabulous. Again, Avildsen took a piece of shit project and made it into a hilarious movie with an X rating when it came out. It had an X rating, and yet I raised some of the money for it. We all made money from the investing in it. So there's a good lesson there. And the point I'm making is that you can make good art without big stars. And Stallone stuck to his guns, and he wouldn't let them change the tone of the movie. He wanted to be the star, and Avildsen wanted him as the star. So there's a lesson there, No, to
you're
thine
right.
own self be true. To thine own self be true.
That phrase. You can't ask for greater vindication of that principle than that film. And it's an important lesson, especially that needs to be recognized again by our younger generation, and even my generation as well, that seek instant gratification, reward, achievement, because this is what we're getting sold all the time by corporations.
Right. And instant. Everything has to be instant, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how your country is, but our country, every 30 seconds, there's an advertisement, an advert on television about the lottery because the government makes money off it. So it's constant. You gotta be in it to win it. And look, I just won $1 billion. And yesterday I was, sweeping the streets, and today I got a limousine. I mean, so these poor people who have no education to begin with, they're getting brainwashed. And I see them in my delicatessen. They're in line buying those stupid tickets.
It's like training people to become, I don't know, like addicts, you know?
Well,
But
you're right. It's instant gratification, and nobody talks about, gee, hard work, hard work, and maybe 20 years you'll be able to be successful. Nobody looks at. You never hear that from our leaders. You never hear it. You hear a lot about bullshit, and good bullshit, but you don't hear kind of the work ethic, and the to thine own be true, to thine own self be true ethic.
it's actually, unfortunately, quite similar here. And that's basically based on the power and cultural influence of the United States and its corporations. British corporations mirror what they consider to be successful in the States, but also those American companies are so powerful that they can buy their influence in the United Kingdom as well. And so more and more young people in Scotland and the UK obsess over pop cultural issues or culture war issues and things that are quite unique to the United States. They become now the media obsessions of young Scottish people as well. And it's a strange cultural imperialism. And it infects everything from popular entertainment to politics. And again, it makes the voices of independent artists all the more important because they have the opportunity to be subversive, and they'll provide the only alternative, to that brainwashing.
Agreed. It's just harder and harder to. It's a yin and yang. You can make movies for nothing these days. You don't need money to make movies. You can, scrape a few £1,000s together through your friends and family on Kickstarter, and be a real person, be a nurse or a teacher, and save a little money, and you can make a damn good movie for £3,000. You can make a brilliant movie, and we have a couple of directors who've made movies for under $20,000, and they're great. They're as good as any movie I've made for $500,000, or maybe they're better. And the point is, everybody's impatient. They're impatient. They want the gold overnight. And Woody Allen, I just read his recent memoir, and it's, again, very inspiring. It's great, but I shouldn't be saying that. I'll be canceled like he is. But it's terrific. It's very inspiring. And you come out of it, you can't help but come out of it about saying this guy worked his fucking ass off. And he's a genuine intellectual. He's a genuine lover of cinema. He's funny as fuck, but his comedy didn't come overnight. He worked on it. He wrote. And as Woody Allen has said, success is 88% just showing up.
Yes, quite right.
Of course, he may be fucking his daughter, but art and Jesus Christ don't necessarily go together. Although I live by the gold, I do believe in. I'm a Jew, but I do believe in the turning the other cheek, and hashtag love and truth. Or hashtag truth and love is more my truth and love. Just you have to stay with that. And if you don't, you may have a Rolls Royce for a few years, but eventually the bank is going to take it back from you.
I think you do make a very good point. And I think that people, again, I'm picking on younger people or people my age and younger, do experience a kind of cognitive dissonance when it comes to art and ethics. At the moment, they assume that art should reflect their ethics. But, the beautiful music of Wagner was made by an anti-Semite. Artistic merit is not based on our moral appraisal, But nowadays, though, of course, this is the kind of, I consider to be moral puritanism that seeks to censor art based on the ethics of the artist. And it's like, come on, guys, there's probably the guy working at Amazon packing your iPod or whatever eats kittens and you don't know it, but but you're not going to send it back.
Right, and they work their ass off too. Those people, they work their asses off in this country, and they can't live. They have to take 2 jobs.
I think
It's
it's
horrible.
like
We're becoming a third world country here, but what you say is very, very correct. No question.
well,
about it.
it's like one of the ethical arguments I heard was something like, I would never listen to the music of Wagner because I do not support anti-Semitism. And I thought, well, that's a bit like saying you won't watch Schindler's List because you don't want to witness acts of anti-Semitism.
It's ridiculous. It's like saying I'm not going to
horrible.
watch Leni Riefenstahl's Leni Riefenstahl, who created the propaganda. She created it. I'm not going to watch it because she worked for the Nazis. How stupid. She used to stay in my father's apartment when she came to New York. She and my father and stepmother were buddies. And I have some autographed books from Leni Riefenstahl, and I have a lot of her papers too. When my stepmother died, I've got a pile of Riefenstahl's paper, which my what do you call it? My archives are in Oklahoma at the university there, the American Heritage place. And so I'm going to send, I'll send those over there in case anybody wants to read them. But how fascinating, it's very interesting. I shouldn't look at her Triumph of the Will, or I shouldn't look at her Olympiad. Come on, as Joe Biden says. Joe Biden says, come on.
Exactly. Andy likes ice cream. I mean, I like ice cream too. So that's a good. I think my biggest anxiety, and I digress a little bit, is just a future or a present whereby the appraisal of art is based on its ideological virtues and not its artistic virtues. And that seems like, Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit and everything like that. And of course, whatever evil that does occur in that sphere will be done with the best of intentions, won't it? But of course, I must come to my question now about William Shakespeare, because he's an artist that we both admire. In fact, I was in a production of Macbeth, although I was banned from it after my lecturers at the time said I brought the spirit of Puss in Boots to Macbeth. So yeah, it was because my costume looked like something out of a Mel Brooks production, and everyone else had proper stuff. But never mind. You've directed Tromeo and Juliet and Shakespeare's Shitstorm as well. Tromeo and Juliet being, of course, Romeo and Juliet, and Shakespeare's Shitstorm being an adaptation of The Tempest. Can you tell me a little bit about your love of Shakespeare, why that inspired those 2 particular films, and also whether you would ever consider an adaptation of my favorite Shakespeare play, Macbeth?
Well, what got me going with Shakespeare is the British Film Institute did a retrospective, a season as they call it, a long time ago of Troma movies. And during the day, they had to kind of entertain me. So one of their volunteers took me to Stratford-on-Avon, tourist. And whilst there, Shakespeare's spirit entered me. Shakespeare's soul entered my body. And suddenly I had the idea of doing Tromeo and Juliet. And we had some investors at the time. And when I mentioned it, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. And for 5 years, I was working on that script, and I couldn't get it. I tried everything. I wrote with people. I wrote my own draft. I had high school kids come in, and because I wanted to hear their slang, I had high school kids reading actually reading the play. I had I did a draft where it was all contemporary English, and I couldn't figure out the balcony speech, and I was dissatisfied to some extent with the ending. I always wanted Romeo and Juliet to live, and luckily for me, a friend of my sister's, Susan Kaufman, who has been the art director on Mother's Day, my brother Charles Kaufman's masterpiece, and she's a production designer. But she had a best friend who worked at HBO, who I hate. She worked at HBO, and the woman at HBO said she had gotten a resume for a kid who sounded just perfect to be my assistant. And that was James Gunn. And she sent over the resume. And on his resume, it said his various educational things, but it also said he's a performance artist who has vomited on stage. And of course, that's my Hitler. Yeah, Mel Brooks, was, the producers said Brooks.
Exactly.
That's our Hitler. But anyway, so James came in, and after 5 years, he had a master's degree and had written a book. He was not thinking about movies. He loved movies, but he was not in that direction. So I gave him what we had on Romeo and Juliet, which stunk. And a couple of weeks later, he came back with a very good draft. The only problem was it had 7 urination scenes in it. And I felt, I'm not too much into that. It was too many. So, and, there were other things. But he figured it out. And it's a great movie, right? The balcony speech in Romeo and Juliet is brilliant. It's wonderful.
It is.
And the whole thing that James Gunn did was fantastic, or fantoxic, as we say, fantoxic. So the Tempest was my favorite Shakespeare play. I would have done it earlier, but I wanted to wait till I was old, and which I am now, and I can feel. I am Prospero. I feel it. I can feel it. And like Prospero, it's about losing power. It's about getting old. It's about magic. It's about romance. It's about fantasy. It's very druggy. You have to admit that, which is a big thing for me. And so finally, at the age of 70 something, Gabe Friedman and I and Shakespeare came up with the story for Shakespeare's Shitstorm. And then a wonderful young man who has written some other movies that are on Troma now, and directed, and I'm producing his latest film. Brandon Bassam, terrific writer. I'm sure he'll be up there with James Gunn if he wishes to be. And he wrote a wonderful script. And it's certainly not mainstream, and it's certainly not going to be profitable, but it's the best film I've made. # Shakespeare Shitstorm. It's way out there, but it's very entertaining. And anyone who studies or who knows anything about Shakespeare, who has a little bit of sophistication and is slightly okay with a bit of graphic slapstick cartoon violence, should have no problem with the movie. But unfortunately, 98% of the world will have a problem with it. But thanks to our Troma fan base, we'll survive. It's thanks to our fans. We look at so much. Our fans do everything for us, including making the movies. They were the crew and cast of # Shakespeare Shitstorm. Nobody on that film was not a Troma fan. They may not have been after we finished shooting, but it was the best cast and crew I ever had in terms of enthusiasm and dedication.
A Macbeth adaptation isn't too likely then, because I imagine you will do a third Shakespeare adaptation to complete the trilogy. If you do, would it be Macbeth, or would you have another Shakespeare play in mind?
I really don't know. I haven't thought about it. That's a very good question. I mean, Macbeth is the Scottish play, of course. I saw it recently. My wife and I saw it with the British director. I'm losing it. The guy who got the Oscar. He did.
Again, I know the film.
We met him at Cannes. He went to see Romeo and Juliet at Cannes. Fabulous. It was great. Blood and people, really good fights. I mean, fights enough so that I was scared that one of them would get hurt. I mean, the swords weren't plastic.
That's why I always quite like the Polanski Macbeth as well. It was very visceral. It was very sexually charged, and it was very violent. And I feel like that's the best way to express.
Well, that was a Canon release, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't it?
Wow. Okay, I wasn't.
I believe so.
That.
It was one of the very few good movies Canon made. I mean, why should we deny ourselves the pleasure of that just to punish him for being a shithead? Come on.
I think it's because people perceive liking a work of art as an endorsement on the morality and ethics of the artist.
Well,
but of course, we talked about this already, and if that was the case, then you would never look at a painting by Caravaggio because he was a murderer. You know,
Exactly. That's
you
right.
can enjoy a work of art
Sure.
without endorsing the artist. In fact, it takes a mature mind to make a distinction between a person and an object, you know.
Very true. And Sundance Film Festival, perfect example of the hypocrisy. They worshipped the emperor of Sundance was Harvey Weinstein, right? People were licking his ass up. We started Troma Dance during Sundance, so I went there for about 10 years, and the Sundance people were all over. They worshipped Harvey Weinstein. The media, mainstream media, worshipped Harvey Weinstein. Hillary Clinton worshipped Harvey Weinstein. Bill Clinton worshipped Harvey Weinstein. And by the way, Clinton worshipped Epstein too, it looks like. He had a lot of time with Epstein on Epstein's private plane and all that crap. So did the Prince of England, right? Prince Harry or Prince somebody.
Yeah,
Right?
Andrew, yeah.
Those were the Harvey Weinstein was an American hero to be worshipped by the mainstream art community of the United States of America, including Sundance, Cannes Film Festival, blah blah blah. Look at him. Look at the shit. I was hired by Harvey Weinstein and his wonderful brother. How many years ago? Probably when we first started Troma Entertainment. I was a hot production manager, and that's partly how we made our living. I worked on these big time movies and also independent movies, and I was very good at the budgets. And they came to me to do a budget for them, which I did. And they took Michael and me out to dinner. We had stone crabs and the blah blah blah. They never paid me. They never paid. And I stayed friendly with Weinstein because I've been going to Cannes Film Festival since '71, and eventually we'd cross paths there, and we'd say, "Hi, how you doing?" But my partner, no way would he ever talk to either Weinstein or Bob Shea, who created New Line Cinema, which is now a piece of Warner Brothers, which is now a piece of AT&T telephone company. So Michael, if you don't want to cross, you do not want to cross Michael Hers. Let's put it that way. But I'm more forgiving.
This segues into a question,
Yeah.
which is about the political and cultural issues that concern you and how your films have often made commentary on those kind of issues. And it would be quite interesting to look at Shakespeare's Shitstorm as an example as well of what cultural, political issues that film's exploring, and just even how important it is to your heart to use film as a way to explore political and cultural issues.
Well, the themes of Shakespeare's Shitstorm. One, my whole marriage. I've been married for almost 50 years, and I didn't watch TV much before that. But my wife watches the early morning chat shows, and every 10 minutes since we've been married, there's a commercial on TV, an advert promoting drugs, medicine, pills, purple pill, a pill for this, a pill for that. The taking of pills is part of the American heritage now. The children are conditioned to take you got a hangnail, take a pill. You got you're a little uncomfortable, take a tranquilizer. You're this, you're that. So this big pharma is responsible for many ills in this country. Most recently, the OxyContin situation. And my daughter Charlotte Kaufman, who is also a filmmaker, smart enough not to work for Troma. She's making a big movie for HBO. She's making a movie for HBO now. Well, it's a documentary. We'll see what happens. But she sent me a book called Dreamland because she knows I hate those big drug companies. And there it was. There's the Troma. There was basically my theme. One of my themes. Basically, how these big pharma companies have they bribe the doctors. They take them on expensive voyages and cruises and parties and hookers and whores and God knows what else, and they bribe them. Anyway, so that's part of the shitstorm. And then the reason hashtag is in the title, it's very important because the Twitter sphere and the world of social media has really corrupted the whole world, especially in my country, where you have these third-rate bloggers and assholes ruining people, ruining the good people, censor, what do you call it? Cancel society. So
Mhm.
that's a big theme of Shakespeare's shitstorm. And so my satire combines the two themes, and I think it's great. But it does have shit in the title. And again, I don't think the Sundance Film Festival is going to be too interested.
I think it's a courageous and important artistic stance to provide a critique of, I guess, what one describes as cancel culture. I've often encountered the arguments for it, and I have seen examples where it could be said to have had a benefit of sorts, but the negatives I've seen seem to far outweigh the positives and have often contributed to even the suicides of certain
That's right.
individuals.
It has contributed to suicide of people who weren't politically incorrect, people were great comedians who have flourishing satirical careers, careers of satire, and get canceled.
These are difficult days for artists, especially because
Yeah,
to be creative means taking chances and to sometimes be provocative. And any nuance seems to have vanished on social media. So, in a way, what social media platforms are rewarding are a particularly infantile sort of binary behavior: good, bad. And then they feed the messages that will get the most engagement. So if you have said something, Twitter is going to be your enemy and will make sure that those most likely to get angry and click on it and say something will get to see it first. It's a very poisonous, disturbing
yeah, that's
use
right.
of the media.
No, it's terrible. It's awful, and they just pile on, and then there's a lot of fake stuff that they do, and all. I mean, it really is not. But anyway, that's what I'm making fun of. These ultra. I don't know what.
Moving on from these very highbrow, cerebral topics, it would be great to have an exciting idea of what Troma is currently achieving. For example, there is the platform Troma Now, which I know a lot of Troma fans will already know of, but for fans of independent film that are checking out our channel, we want to let them know where they can enjoy hundreds of Troma titles, but also what projects you have coming up next. So please tell us about the platform and any new films you
Oh,
are working on.
well, thank you. We started Troma Now because we saw the big platforms slowly strangling the independent artists. The deals were getting worse and worse, and as we just talked about, the canceling and censoring were clearly directed at independent art and not at the big boys, not at Netflix or not. There was a double standard, put it that way. So we started Troma Now to as a platform. The same, basically, it is a Netflix, and we put up about 10 new movies. They're not all Troma movies. They're maybe movies by you, Laurie, but a lot of brand new directors and producers, as well as music videos, shorts that we like that have something to say. Comic books on Troma Now. We have some. We have Troma comic books, but we also have comic books by fans, uh, and we've got great Tromette sets of photographs. And it's a community. People go on, they get dates because Troma Now is basically the future, but now. Troma Now is a place where true lovers of cinema gather and talk to each other and make comments and meet each other and go on dates. There's nothing like it. I don't think. I don't think there's anything like Troma Now out there. I know that there's some other platforms, but I've looked at their movies and they're all formulaic. We have truly independent movies. We've got great movies by great people who have gone on to do great things. We have Robert De Niro's first movie. We didn't make it, but a friend of mine did, and we were the only people willing to distribute it. We have Dustin Hoffman's first movie, which we bought. I have to admit, we didn't distribute it initially, but we have Troma is a repository for very important historical movies, and Troma now you can see them, as well as you can see Brandon Bassam's latest film, which I was honored to produce, Slashing Part Two. It has a subtitle, "The End of the Beginning," or "The Beginning of the End," or something. It has a great title. But Slashing One is on Troma now, and based on that, I gave him some money to make Slashing Two. There are great movies. We've got two women making movies for us now in post-production. They also already have movies on Troma now. Mercedes the Muse has directed. She still has. She's on hiatus. They still have a little bit to shoot. Divide and Conquer. She's got a very good movie called Honor Killing that's on Troma now. And then Liam, who's in Sheffield, Liam Regan, who's worked on a couple of our movies and worked on Return to Nukem High and Return to Nukem High and # Shakespeare Shitstorm. And he's in those movies too. He made a movie called My Bloody Banjo, which is on Troma now. And I'm producing his new movie, which is called Eating Mrs. Campbell, which is not just about cannibalism. It's again, it will do a little bit to change the world. You know, that's the whole idea. Take part in the actions and passions of your time. So I think if people want to really see movies of the future and also meet some major stars of the past and the future, subscribe to Troma now. The first month is free, so you can see as much as you want. And usually people go on and subscribe. And we have no money for advertising, so nobody knows about it. But we've got a very loyal fan base, as I've mentioned. And word of mouth is the one thing that the big conglomerates cannot buy. Rupert Murdoch can spend $200 million on making a movie about a volcano with no lava. They can do that and advertise and brainwash the 13-year-old kids to go buy the T-shirts and see the movie. We can't. We have to wait for word of mouth. But we've been around for 47 years. Troma's been there for 47 years. I for 50. So we've built up a very loyal, hardworking fan base like you, who truly believe in creating art, speaking their minds, and trying to make the world a slightly better place.
No, absolutely. I mean, what excites me about Troma now as well is that it feels like the closest thing you could have to spiritually going back in time into maybe a late 80s VHS store before distribution in physical media was so regulated, where you could find all these titles that could be extraordinary, different, uncensored. And there's a mix, of course, from the kind of classic films, art films that you talk about, and also new exploitation films. The much maligned exploitation genre is being kept alive, in fact, by Troma and its support for independent modern artists who want to use that art form, you know? And
well, also,
so,
people have to, you know, again, a baseball metaphor, but we have the minor leagues here who are the feeders to the, we are like we are the training ground for a lot of young people who cannot pay $80,000 a year to go to New York University Film School or USC Film School. $80,000 a year. Who are the people that are going to be produced by those places? Right? They're not going to be the Martin Scorsese's of tomorrow. I guarantee you. They're going to be, I don't know what. Again, they're going to be the rich, whatever. But the point is, you know, just what you said is correct. We need to encourage the independent world of art. And you know, as I said, the word exploitation is very unfair because every movie exploits the stars or the themes or the news or whatever. You know, right now there's probably 100 movies being made about COVID, so they're exploiting COVID. Hollywood has just announced they're going to. MGM has just announced a big mainstream movie about GameStop. I don't know if you've heard about it, but
oh yes, absolutely, yeah,
the stock market.
Phenomenon there.
Yeah, so you know, there's all that going on. So everybody's exploiting something for the movie. So, but again, it's a way to get the independent artists to ride the back of the bus. Call it an art film, so that half the world doesn't want to go see it. I don't know that I want to see an art film, although I do love Stan Brakhage and a lot of the French auteurs and whatever. But the point is, when I hear immediately I'm like, oh well, I better wait till I have more energy. I'm going to go back and watch Eli Roth's movie.
So basically, Troma now is a good platform for people who don't want to only watch what they're told to by Apple, Google, or Amazon. If you want something beyond that, if you want to go beyond the edge, then
something that comes from the heart. Something comes from the heart.
Yeah.
I mean, Sam
Ashurst, that's it, Sam Ashurst.
Yeah, I mean, that movie is in no way is that going to satisfy the fans of the Toxic Avenger, but it's a very original, unusual art film, and the people who work for Troma, the guy who acquires movies for us, recognized it and brought it to my attention that, hey, this is really interesting. It's definitely not Class of Nukem High or Sergeant Kabuki Man NYPD or Troma's War or Terra Firma. It's something totally unto itself. And, I really appreciate that. And I think people may go on it and go to Troma now and look at it and turn it off and go on to Bloodsucking Freaks. But there are people who go on and who will like it. And
they could discover films as well, so they could watch that and then watch something very different. Right. And yet, what combines them or links them all is that they're at the heart of independent cinema, and that's where Troma now is. Right. It's at the heart of independent cinema.
Correct.
Can I ask about any upcoming productions? Obviously, COVID has impacted production around the world, but is there any projects that you're thinking about directing or?
Well, I'm looking now to see what I want to do next as far as directing. I'm 75 years old, and I don't know that I have the strength to do another movie on the scale of hashtag Tromeo and Juliet for $500,000. I mean, it was. I had vertigo after I finished that film. I was just getting too old. You got a couple of. I don't know if you've seen it. But have you seen that film by any chance?
Oh yes, Vertigo, okay. Alfred Hitchcock, yeah.
But I mean, we had to do, it's really sleep on the floor and learn how to defecate in a paper bag. It's eat crap food, and we went to Albania to shoot some of it, and we had 5 weeks in New York, literally 24 hours, just too much. So I'm looking for an unusual, one-of-a-kind script now that's got something to say, preferably satire, but I'll take any genre. If somebody out there has a wonderful romantic comedy that's truly one of a kind, truly original and entertaining, and has a point of view, we'd love to look at it and direct it. But right now, I don't have another project, but I am producing a few films.
Yes, it's an interesting alternative discipline, although it's one we've always combined, both of us, directing and producing in many respects. I like Roger Corman as well in his career. I find myself starting to produce a little bit more than I direct, and it can be rewarding, working with artists and helping them tell their stories and having input, and developing and forming these works of art as well.
I've been buddies. Our family and Roger Corman's family have been friends for quite a long time. And in fact, he and Julie are they're executive producers on a documentary about Troma that my daughters have been making. But it's a big long-term project. It's been several years on that. If you go to Troma now, and my books, I have a couple. I've interviewed Roger a couple of times, both on camera and for books. But there's one interview I did where I asked him, "Why did you stop directing?" And the whole clip, about 10 minutes maybe, he explains why. I get it. I get it. It's hard directing on a low budget. Good God, holy shit! And then to go to Albania and and Albania was great. Terrific, great crew, great wonderful CGI. They did a great job for 8 days. We got incredible production value. I would recommend in fact, 2 or 3 mainstream movies have gone there now, thanks to Troma succeeding there. But the point is, it's the kind of movies we make are very have a lot of production value, and made for. I mean, hashtag Shakespeare Shitstorm. One of the film festivals that played it virtually, of course, one of the genre festivals. The guy said that Troma's Shakespeare Shitstorm was a $20 million movie made for $500,000. The curator, and he's right. He's right. It's very hard work. So I'm looking for something that might be more character driven, but yet is entertaining. And I think I found one, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure yet. And my wife gets involved, so I gotta pass it to her, see what she.
That'll be exciting to see, especially, and it would be almost a creative freedom in a way to have something stripped back, where it's really back to basics, and it just allows you to focus on experimentation and character.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I haven't. I can't write that. The stuff I write is too damn complicated.
I'm the exact same as well. I mean, in fact, my partner, Sarah Daly, forced me into retirement as a writer. But as a producer, I can still add too many things to try and enhance the production value. Yeah. Can we get twice as many extras, twice as much goo? It's like, constant debate.
Well, I do, in terms of auteur theory, I don't interfere any bit with the directors that we've produced. You can ask on Mutant Blast, Fernando sent me the script, which I liked a lot, but we had known each other for several years, and he had worked for us on 2 movies, and he's a great guy. So I did give him notes. We had several discussions. We had some very spirited discussions, but when it came down to it, I always gave him his freedom. I never interfered. He took some of my notes, some he didn't. Okay, no problem. And I've done that with the ladies. Heidi Moore is directing Kill Dolly Kill, which is a how shall I say it? A sequel to her first movie, Dolly Deadly. It's a kind of a LBGT musical horror kind of thing, totally original. But she totally is on her own there. I haven't interfered other than a note or two here and there. I do send, I have musicians that come to me who want music in my movies, so I send it to her. I think I found her some good music. And Mercedes the Muse, when asked by her, I've given my notes, and I've also offered, if she asks, people I know who might be able to give her CGI inexpensively or music, so I can help them. But I do not wish to interfere in. On Kabuki Man, Sergeant Kabuki Man, NYPD, which many people feel is their favorite Troma movie. It's probably our highest budget too. We co-produced Sergeant Kabuki Man, NYPD with Namco, who are now owned by Bandai. They created Pac-Man and other video games and whatever. And they were mainstream, and I wasn't. And we went back and forth, and they wanted something much more mainstream. They wanted a character that they could put in. They have some amusement parks in Japan, and they wanted sort of. And I didn't get it. Goes back again 30 years or more. And I'm like, I want this, and I want the guy to eat worms. He's got to eat worms. So we'd have these back and forth. And my partners, not mine, Troma's co-producers, Mr. Nakamura, who's a billionaire, was very, and he just died at the age of 99, 25th richest man in Japan. And he was, how nice. He would literally talk to me, and not he, but his assistant, but he would approve it. And we kind of went back and forth, and we would compromise. And the mistake I made, probably, I'm not Edith Piaf, je regrette beaucoup, is that the movie ended up being neither fish nor fowl. And it's still very amusing and very good. And it's a charming gateway film for Troma. but it isn't what Namco wanted to make. So when it premiered in Japan, I think there was great disappointment that it was too, it just wasn't what they wanted. And
Right. Mm-hmm.
when it went to the theaters here, it wasn't enough Troma, so that there was a little bit too much. It was too family friendly. It came out as a very soft R, or it may have come out as PG-13 in the theaters. I don't remember, but boy, that I talk about it in my books. I regret that, beaucoup. I think if I would have either done the way James Gunn would have done it, is he would have listened to the big boys and then figured out how to get what he wants, but not to turn off the audience, which is what I managed to do.
I mean, that's always an enormous challenge, though, reconciling the objectives of the financiers with the artistic vision of the project. And
Trey Parker and Matt Stone, who came out of Troma, they get exactly what they want with the. You look at South Park, and those are basically cartoons with the Troma graphic violence and many themes. The first season of South Park, it was all Troma. Everything I saw in it was a Troma. So I mean, not everything, but there was all sorts of stuff there. But how brilliant to do it in animated form, so that you don't get censored.
And Troma is also a sort of spiritual home for them as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And the release of their musical, Cannibal. What's it called again? Sorry.
Cannibal the musical.
Yes, that's right. Cannibal the musical.
Yeah, and there's Toxic. By the way, there's Toxic Avenger the musical. I don't know if it's played in Scotland, but it played the West End twice. Toxic Avenger the musical, and the music was written by David Bryan, the original Bon Jovi keyboard guy, who's still there. He is still the keyboard guy. He wrote the music, and Joe DiPietro, Tony-winning writer, wrote the libretto, or whatever you want, the script, and the show played for a year in New York off Broadway, but in a very nice theater, and the audience was mainly half old people that like to go to musicals in the theater, women with the blue hair, and the other half were Troma fans with things in their noses and earlobe things.
And blue hair as well, probably.
Yeah, you're right. It was so interesting. And the theater had an area with a bar, a big area where you could sit and kind of like a lounge. And it had about 300 seats. So there'd be a lot of people milling around before and after and during intermission. And they'd meet each other, they'd chat, talk. It was kind of fun. And the musical is totally their own. It's totally David Bryan and Joe DiPietro's work. And yet it's got the humor and point of view and the flavor of Troma's movies. They translated it beautifully. And it's pretty much the only thing that I've been involved in that my wife could take her debutante friends and her junior league friends to see. So she's seen it about 50 times. She can't take her friends would absolutely shit in their pants if they saw Terra Firma or Romeo and Juliet or any of my movies.
It's a complete testimony to your creative stewardship of Troma, that Troma as a brand, and not just as a commercial brand, but as an artistic aesthetic, as an intellectual expression of comedy, satire, and the grotesque and everything, has evolved across so many disciplines, from theatrical films, VHS, digital, and theater, and musicals and comics and publications. And also as well and of course to the commercial stewardship as well of yourself and Michael Hertz as well. It's something that so many companies who would have claimed greater mantles in their time cannot claim today. For Troma has truly stood the test of time.
I thank you for that, and I think in the fullness of time, at some point, in fact, the people who work for us for 25, last 30 years, there's always somebody who says to me, after you get hit by a bus, suddenly the mainstream media is going to oh, we've lost a national treasure. He's done so much. There'd be no Deadpool. There'd be no this. There'd be, he discovered that. He did Troma Dance for. We're still producing a free film festival every year called Troma Dance Film Festival. Many
Yeah,
of
it's true. They will probably want to possess you,
yeah,
and
suddenly,
as
yeah,
if you were one of some way something that they could, yeah. But there will be independent artists who will carry the torch
that
and
is very
will
true.
remember to
Absolutely
put two fingers up to the corporations, in the spirit
correct.
of
Yeah,
yourself and Trauma.
you said it. And also, talent will out. As James Gunn is a great person. So is Eli Roth, John G. Avildsen. These were wonderful people who started in the New York underground, so to speak. But they wanted a more mainstream career, and they wanted to get Oscars and have the fame, and they deserve it. And they make good art. Every James Gunn film is great, and I can't wait to see Suicide. His new Suicide Squad, his new take on the first Suicide Squad was not very good, to say the least. And I can't wait to see his new one, mainly because I have a cameo, of course. And I'm a
And you'll be
narcissist,
fantastic at that.
but I'm sincere that you're going to see a Macon Blair. Macon Blair is the guy who's going to direct Toxic Avenger. He's only directed one movie. It's terrific. It's great. You can see the talent. You can see the guts. You can see the love of cinema in that one movie, and he knows
That's
more.
right, and this is a well financed big commercial retelling of the Toxic Avenger.
Yep. If they actually start shooting, well, they signed up Peter Dinklage. You know him?
Oh yes, of course, he's
Yeah.
fantastic from
He's
Game
in.
of Thrones. Yeah,
Yeah, he's huge. Well, sorry, that's a bad joke.
the manner of
He,
speaking. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. He is a big star. I'm sure they're investing a lot of money in him. And the Macon Blair wrote a wonderful script. I've read it. It's better than the original Toxic Avenger. And I certainly am not going to kibitz. I'm certainly not going to make suggestions unless I'm asked. And so far, the only suggestion I've been asked is if I come across somebody who I've worked with, who the Troma fans might want to see in a mainstream movie, that I should send them suggestions. But I learned my lesson from the Toxic Avenger musical, because I did give them notes, and they were they invited me to all the table readings and all that stuff, and they asked me for notes, and I gave it to them, but they totally ignored them, and I think they're right. It's their project, and boy, they definitely. If I had fought with them like I did on Kabuki Man, who knows what we would have had. What they did is terrific. People love Toxic Avenger, the musical, and it's in many. Well, now with COVID, not, but it's played in theaters all over our country. It's been to Korea. It's been to Australia. It's, as I say, it had two runs on the West End in London, and yeah, we've been lucky. Toxic Avenger. He's in more mediums probably than most of the mainstream Batman. He's got a cartoon show, Toxie. He's got. Does Batman have a musical? I don't think so. I think Toxie.
No, he doesn't. No.
I think Toxie has more different forms of art, media, whatever you want to call it, than any superhero. And yet, his movie cost about 0.5% of a typical mainstream movie.
So, Mr. Lloyd Kaufman, I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of Hex Studios for sharing your story and your wisdom to the benefit of so many aspiring filmmakers. Your achievements speak for themselves, and I've said already how they have stood the test of time, and they will continue to do so for many years and decades to come. You truly are a hero in the field of independent film. Like my own hero, Roger Corman, I hold both of you in the highest esteem. So thank you so much for sharing your time with me today.
Well, thank you, and thank you to Hex and to the fans in Scotland, and for keeping Troma in the public eye. And I really enjoyed this talk. At the beginning, I said to you, I only have an hour, just in case, because sometimes I get a lot of people not prepared and just no background. They haven't, they're fanboys. And you clearly you made it really interesting. So I'm proud to have. I don't know how much time we've spent, but definitely a lot more than an hour, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thank
You've
you,
made
sir.
you've made an old sad drunk very happy.
It's my pleasure.
Cheers.
Be sure to hit subscribe and the bell notification icon so you don't miss any of our future videos. Also, if you would like to support our channel and help us make more content, then check out the Patreon link in the video description below. Thank you and goodbye.